The United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, launched its Healthy Markets program in Vietnam at the end of October. The program is an initiative to encourage the investment of local private sector and foster growth of a commercial market. The USAID's $15 million project will support efforts to grow a viable commercial market for high-quality HIV-related goods and services, including condoms, HIV testing, and counseling. Running from 2014 to 2019, the project will also offer market data and consumer profiling, establish a market growth advisory board, technical assistance, and innovation funding. In general, it will support a phased transition from an environment where HIV-related goods and services are predominantly subsidized to one where non-subsidized commodities, services, and distribution channels are the norm. According to Vietnam's Ministry of Health, the country had more than 216,000 people living with HIV and more than 66,000 people with AIDS at the end of November 2013. The Vietnamese government's budget for HIV/AIDS prevention and control amounted to 862 billion Vietnam dongs in 2014, dropping nearly 40% from 2013. The plunge mainly resulted from the reduction of international assistance for Vietnam, such as funding from the World Bank. Hello and welcome to Sharing Vietnam. Vietnam has made remarkable progress in HIV prevention over the past decade, but much remains to be done, especially given the reduction of international assistance for Vietnam. And in our program today, we'll have a conversation with Mrs. Kim Green, the Chief of Party of Healthy Markets Project, which is dedicated to promoting the role of the private sector in ensuring the sustainable development of the market for HIV prevention goods and services in Vietnam. So, hello, Mrs. Green. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Yeah. First of all, how do you describe the progress of HIV prevention in Vietnam in recent years?
Really, the last decade has proved to be incredibly successful in offering HIV prevention care and treatment services to those most at risk. So starting from 2005, there was a very large-scale initiative supported between the Vietnam government, Ministry of Health in particular, the U.S. government. This initiative was called PEPFAR. And then this was also followed by funding from the Global Fund, from DFID, World Bank, so many different entities, bilaterals and multilaterals, supporting the HIV response in Vietnam. And this was tremendous, and it resulted in thousands of people being put on life-saving treatment and many people being prevented from acquiring HIV. These collective initiatives resulted in a 50% reduction in HIV prevalence over a 10-year period. So a phenomenal success.
Apart from the success, how do you describe the challenges with HIV prevention efforts in Vietnam today?
Because Vietnam's economy is robust and because it's growing, which is a fantastic thing, and it's something to be celebrated, but as a result, donor funding is declining quite dramatically. So by 2020, it's anticipated that much of the donor funding, at least for health, will no longer be in existence. Now, why is this a challenge? Well, this is a challenge because 80% of funding for the HIV response comes from these external sources. And so the government of Vietnam is faced with a very difficult situation. How do they finance, through domestic resources, on the public side, but also on the private sector side, a response that maintains the current momentum and eliminates HIV, which is the goal, eventually by 2030. So this is a substantive challenge, and it's one where everyone is now searching for the answers and the right approach.
You have recently introduced the Healthy Markets Project. So how can the project help deal with the problem in Vietnam?
Healthy Markets, this is a U.S.-funded initiative. It's implemented by PATH with its partners CSIP and TNA Ogilvy. And the initiative is really focused on leveraging the private sector by creating space in the commercial market for a private sector response. And by space, I mean that in the past, because donor funds supported most HIV prevention care and treatment services, things were free, services and commodities were free or were highly subsidized. So that meant that there really wasn't room for the private sector to invest. At the same time, there is a proportion of the population at risk that is able to and would like to pay for commodities and services. So there's now this opening, and Healthy Markets is now stepping into this opening and working in partnership with the government and private sector entities such as VCCI, for example, local condom manufacturers, local distributors, and private healthcare providers to establish high-quality services and goods and make them available to those who are able to pay.
The first meeting of the Market Growth Advisory Board under the Healthy Markets Project took place in Hanoi at the beginning of December. The meeting drew the participation of many representatives from the public and private sectors, as well as non-governmental organizations. The board will mobilize solutions, expertise, interests and resources of all sectors to assist the development of HIV-related commodities and services.
Như Hải Phòng chúng tôi cũng đã làm thí điểm một cái dự án, đó là huy động y tế tư nhân vào trong giám sát, phát hiện người mắc lao để sớm gửi vào các dịch vụ, các cái cơ sở y tế được phát hiện, chẩn đoán và điều trị, đặc biệt là liên quan đến lao kháng thuốc. Và từ cái dự án đó, với cái bối cảnh hiện nay nguồn lực tài trợ quốc tế giảm đi như vậy tại Hải Phòng, thì chúng tôi thấy là nên chăng mình phải tìm hiểu, tìm kiếm cũng như là làm một cái gì đó trong cái mảng khối tư nhân để giúp cho chương trình phòng chống AIDS tại Hải Phòng, cũng như là hiện nay dự án đã đặt lên gọi là tầm quốc gia.
Để mà chuyển đổi từ cái hàng được tài trợ sang hàng thương mại thì phải cần cả một giai đoạn. Và một trong những cái việc cần phải làm là những cái chương trình như thế này, chương trình Healthy Market này, để quảng bá, để truyền thông cho người dân nhận biết được rằng cái giá trị thực của cái bao cao su là nó như thế này, chứ không phải là cái giá rẻ tiền như hồi trước.
One of the solutions advocated by many representatives from the public and private sectors is the introduction of regulation on quality logos for HIV-related products, especially condoms. The measure is aimed to eliminate a large number of cheap and substandard condoms, which are now circulated in Vietnam. A representative from Giang Dong Joy Stock Company, a Vietnamese private condom dealer, said the substandard products are badly affecting both customers and quality condom businesses.
Bản thân mình và công ty mình bây giờ đang gặp những khó khăn là có sự cạnh tranh của những cái hàng kém chất lượng. Tức là hiện giờ cái thị trường bao cao su ở Việt Nam mình chưa được quản lý một cách chặt chẽ, và gần như là sản phẩm bao cao su nhập vào không có một cái cơ quan nào thẩm định và kiểm tra chất lượng trước khi nhập vào Việt Nam.
And Mrs. Kim, could you give us the reasons why the Healthy Markets Project gives priority to promoting the role of the private sector?
So it's really about trying to find the role, defining the role for the public sector and defining the role for the private sector. Now, the public sector is essential. It's critical. So for public health care, it has a role in making sure that particularly the poor, those who are at the base of the pyramid, who don't have the resources to pay for health services, are able to access quality services through the government-supported public health care system. That is essential, and that needs to remain. However, we know that there are finite resources. The Ministry of Health doesn't have all of the resources enabled to cover all of the people who need health care services. And we also know that among those who are able to and willing to pay, some of them prefer to go to the private sector. And this is a priority of the Ministry of Health and others, is to provide choice, is to make choice available, whether it's through the public sector and private sector. And so through the private sector, there's a huge growth in public health care or private health care that's available. So this really indicates that there's quite a demand. There's an estimate that there's a 15% annual growth in this industry.
One of the focuses of HIV/AIDS prevention around the world is closing the gap. So how does the Healthy Markets Project fit into this goal?
Closing the gap is really important right now. We talk about something called 90-90-90. And what that means is that 90% of people living with HIV need to know that they have HIV. And 90% of those people who have HIV need to be able to access care and treatment. And of those who are on treatment, 90% need to have the virus in their blood. It needs to be controlled at a certain level. So this is the ultimate goal, and if we're able to do that, then we can achieve elimination of HIV. This is a globally shared goal. And so the emphasis really is on how do we close the gaps. And we know in Vietnam that just over 50% of those people who need treatment are on treatment. Right? So that's a huge gap. And the reason why is because a large proportion of people do not know they have HIV. So we really need to step up access to HIV testing and counseling so people know their status. Now, we've been doing that through the public sector for many years now. And by working with the private sector, that again offers more choice, more opportunities for people to get tested.
What are the main solutions in order to achieve the goal of the Healthy Markets Project?
So what's really important, we're working across 3 objectives, and they're synergistic. And the first one really is to enhance and enable investment from the private sector. In order to do that, we need to create a more enabling environment. So that's the first objective. The second is related to demand creation, is to make sure that the community is aware of private sector services and commodities. And then the third objective is related to supply side. We need to make sure that there's quality supply side condoms, for example, or services that are available in the market. So these 3 objectives work synergistically to support one goal, which is to grow the market.
I would like to elaborate more on the first objective. How do you work with different partners in Vietnam in order to ensure quality control for HIV prevention goods and services?
And under Objective 1, which is the enabling environment, there's a critical issue right now related to the male condom. UNFPA and Crown agents, under the auspices of the GOPFP, they did a random analysis of condoms on the free market in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. They found that 25% of those condoms were substandard. So substandard can mean a number of things, but that includes vulnerability to breaking, that they broke under a pressure test. So that's a very worrying statistic, because people use condoms, of course, to prevent HIV and other STIs. They also use condoms for family planning. So, one core aspect for us in the enabling environment is to work together with those partners and others to support legislation which enables quality condoms. So that would mean setting standards, and it would also mean enforcing those standards.
And could you give us some information on the timing for the introduction of quality control measures in HIV prevention goods and services?
The Ministry of Health is really leading this, and they're taking this extremely seriously. So they have just changed. There's one particular circular that's under discussion right now, and this relates to the quality of different medical devices. And they've made a very important decision, and this is to change the standing of condoms so that condoms are included in the definition of a medical device. Now, why is this important? This is important because once you elevate the condom and place it in that category, then you must adhere to different quality standards. So this is a very important move of the Ministry of Health.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Well, that's all for our Sharing Vietnam today. Hopefully, the Healthy Markets Project will achieve its expected goals of promoting the role of the private sector in a sustainable market for HIV prevention goods and services in Vietnam. Thank you so much for watching, and see you again next time.